Forgot so much about this one. It's a great day to play, everybody! Welcome on into the channel, yeah! Whether it's your first time here or you were joining us, thank you for being here with us today. You would love to appreciate it, always welcome here, and you are enough. Now, I know it's been a little bit, but today we are gonna be getting back into the BU. We're gonna be doing blood, sweat, and tears. Really excited to get back into this. Sorry for the little bit of hiatus on this stuff, but there's been a little planning and some movement, and we're coming back though. So with this, I do want to disclose, I have seen Blood, Sweat, and Tears one time before, very early on, and I didn't know anything. Like, I just watched it because people were like, you should watch Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Blood, Sweat, and Tears originally, once I started looking into it, was the reason I bought Damien and went on this entire adventure to begin with. So this is kind of what got me started, but I still didn't really know a lot about it. So we're gonna go through it today now with my knowledge of what I know and where we have watched up to the BU so far and give more analysis on that. I'm gonna let the whole thing run through because this is a little bit of a longer video so we can get just kind of like initial reaction and I can kind of see all of it, and then we'll go and break it down piece by piece like we've done in a lot of other these. As always, if you haven't already, please go like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to know when our videos come out, to know when our live streams happen, and you can always check out our other channel if you're looking for any of our other content, Blackpink and Hypen, 17, TXT, Dimash, all the other stuff. That's all on our other, Encanto, that's all on our other channel now. That's gonna be in the links below as well. But, without further ado, let's do this.
내 피땀 눈물 내 마지막 춤을 다 가져가 내 피땀 눈물 내 차가운 숨을 다 가져가 내 피땀 눈물 눈물도 내 몸, 마음, 영혼도 너의 것인 걸 잘 알고 있어. 이건 나를 벌받게 할 줄. Peaches and cream, sweeter than sweet. Chocolate cheeks and chocolate wings. But 너의 날개는 악마의 걸. 너의 그 sweet 앞엔 비려. Kiss me, 아파도 돼. 어서 날 조여줘. 더 이상 아플 수도 없게. Baby, 취해도 돼. 이제 널 들이켜. 내 피땀 눈물 내 마지막 춤을 다 가져가 내 피땀 눈물 내 차가운 숨을 다 가져가 One money One money
Okay. Before we get into all the BU stuff, I'm kind of taking notes in my head. We're gonna go back. This, I think, for me, feels like it's probably one of the first MVs chronologically where you really see them take that leap from like kind of their more hard or youthfulness, and then you get to see like there is just this seductiveness here, which is obviously lending to what's happening in the song. We're gonna come back to that. The dance for this is incredible though, and I think I appreciate that so much more now than I did then. But this entire set is just brilliant, because it's not like some of the other BU videos or some of the other earlier ones where like they're using like this had to be created in a very, very specific way, and there's so many small pieces in here that could have been missed and it aren't, and it's just brilliant.
꽉 쥐고 나 흔들어줘 내가 정신 못 차리게 Kiss me on the lip 술만 내 너라는 감옥에 중독되게 네가 아닌 다른 사람 섬기지 note 알면서도 삼켜버린 독이듯 피땀 눈물 내 마지막 춤을 다 가져가 내 피땀 눈물 나 자꾸 숨을
How good are these outfits? Ah, there's so much here.
He too was a tempter. He too was a link to the second. The evil world with which I no longer wanted to have anything to do.
Forgot so much about this one. Okay. I didn't think I was gonna have to bring Damien back out for this video, but I am. I'm gonna grab a look. There's just two pieces that I think are really important to this, and then we're gonna talk about it. So I will be right back. Okay, so we're gonna walk back through this entire video. There are some definitely things that we want to point out, but when we get to the end, we're gonna come back to a passage out of Damien because it really sums everything up, and is really, if you really want to understand what's happening at the end, we need to understand what happens in Damien. So let's just go and come back through here really quick. So a couple things here that's interesting as we come in. So remember we talked about that there's two sets of pairs. So they have like these lifelong, they have these pairs that you see in the original videos, which you think like they're paired off. But then there's the wings pairs where the blots, the ink blots come together. Those ink blot pairs are the way that they're walking in. So we have Jungkook and RM here. We have V and J-Hope here. I think we had Jimin and Suga here, and then Jin, of course, is going to be on his own. Now, this, from the setup from the beginning, is super, super important in how they are coming in. So if we look here, these doorways are different. So like we have the black columns, and then we have white columns. So we have a white door and a black door, and a white door and a black door, white column, black column. So there is already kind of this good versus evil thing. This is a black angel, this is a white angel from how we're talking about it. So we already kind of have this duality, which is all about Damien, right? Like it's the loss of innocence and the accepting of certain things that you do have to sin in terms of coming into an adulthood, spreading your wings and flying. And we're going to see a lot more of that in here, but I want to show it just as we come in. We have a lot of that, and we see these pairs that have paired up. Now, the next big thing that happens here is this painting. Now, in this painting, and I can't remember the exact name of this painting, but in this painting, it's literally angels fighting demons. So it kind of represents a lot of the things that we're talking about. And then as we back out from it, we again see this play here where Jin essentially has two choices to make. He can either sin, essentially, into adulthood, which is really, this whole thing is kind of a loss of innocence. He can either sin and he can go through the black door, or he can be angelic and remain innocent and he can go through the white door. So we're seeing a lot of the duality already playing out here. Now, before we continue to move forward, let's recap on what I have thought so far. One is that this entire thing is really just a playoff of Damien in terms of loss of innocence. And so it is just about, in order to grow up, in order to spread your wings, that innocence becomes lost, but you have to be accepting of it. You have to be accepting of your true inner self. You have to be accepting of those demons. And we'll come back to Abraxas, which obviously plays a huge part in here. But Abraxas is the god deity, technically above God and the devil, because he encompasses both the light and the darkness. And in order to become our complete selves, in order to spread our wings, which we saw in here, we saw the egg, we talked about that we are going to have to accept these things within ourselves. And so the whole thing could just be a tale about the loss of innocence and going into adulthood. And each one of them obviously has these points where they've lost their innocence, some more than others and some less than others. And in that case, nobody's dead. In the second part, I believe that multiple people have died, including potentially Jin. And I think that Jin may be the catalyst to set all of these events into place. So the reason that the others are paired off and Jin isn't, the reason that we see in the photo, I believe it's at the end of the I Need You or I Run, in the photo, that Jin's in the photo originally, but then when they look back, and I think Jimin's burning the photo, he's not in the photo, is because Jin is actually the one that died. Something happened to Jin. Either he committed suicide or he died, but something happened to Jin and it set off this chain of events for all the other members. That is another theory, and that in this place right here where they're at, this is kind of like, it's almost like purgatory. It's just kind of like the in-between between heaven and hell. It is the decision that we're now making of before we pass along or whatever it is, of what kind of life or what kind of afterlife we're going to lead. And so that's why they're all there together again. And it could be that all of them at this point in time have potentially passed. That I don't know. We're obviously going to get into that. But I think that he may be the catalyst. And then the final one is that maybe he's not, but all of these things are actually in his head. That these are actually pieces of Jin, and that they're all his emotions and different sides of him from innocence all the way on. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. If you want to see my theories on each one and who each member is, you can check out my previous BU videos. There's a list just for the BU videos. But that those are kind of the representations. And we obviously also have like this little butterfly effect thing that I think is going on, where I don't know if Jin can actually go through or if he thinks that he can change events. But even if that's the case, I don't know whether it's a reality or just in his head. A lot of this is, I think, is an acceptance thing. And so he's going to try to change things in his final hours, in his final moments, whatever it is, he's trying to change these things within himself. And whether that's coming to terms with his loss of innocence or coming to terms with his own death, I don't know. But there's a lot of things that could be true. And I don't think that anybody could really say from all the things that I've seen so far that one is more right than the other. I know that we haven't made it to the webtoons yet. I know there's a lot more, but I honestly do think that there's multiple interpretations and it's meant to be left open here. So a lot of time spent here, but the duality is very, very important. So now we see them all in here. We have some very important pictures, though, going on here. This is, I believe, the fall of Icarus in the back here. For those of you who don't know the Icarus story, Icarus is the one that gets the fake wings and then flies too close to the sun because of temptation and then ends up falling. And we're going to see a lot of that here. But we also see like these chandeliers on the ground. So it's kind of signifying some of these members have also fallen too close. And I don't know whether it's trying to tie them together or not, but we see here, I wish that we could zoom in a little bit, but they're in front of two of the members. I'm not sure if there's a significance to that, but they are in front of two of the members. But I think some of these people have obviously tried to fly too close to the sun. Some of them have sinned more than others at this point in time. So then we have Suga cover Jimin's eyes. And this is, I think, where these kind of pairs come in. One of the guesses that I made earlier was that I think that the wing ink blots, even though they weren't the pairs that they were in, that they somehow probably show how tangled their story is, whether that person was the one that led them to their downfall or that person is supposed to be the one that could potentially save them. I think that those pairings have to do with their potential future, their potential past, and how the events kind of went out of control. So we have him covering Jimin's eyes, and then we kind of come here to all of them back together again. And this is what leads me to believe we have this really, really bright color behind them, kind of like almost when it was in Jin's room when he was waking up. We have this really bright color. And when we saw in Awake, in the final parts of Awake, all of the items were in Jin's room. All the items that all of them had made or that were part of, all of them were in Jin's room or in Jin's house. And the entire wall was filled with the Abraxas. And this is what almost leads me to believe that either they are all part of him or in his mind, or that somehow he believes that he can control their destiny. But this, with the light in the background, is definitely, I think, the internal struggle that's happening within Jin, the light versus the darkness, him struggling, which is why he's kind of having this out-of-body experience when all of them are doing this. We don't really spend too much time in the chorus. This part's important, though. So, Jungkook is actually the first one. I think he's got a sucker in his mouth, it looks like, because I think that Jungkook represents Sinclair in his most innocent form. He is the youngest, most adolescent, innocent portion of Sinclair. And as we talked about, Damien and Sinclair at the end, spoilers, are the same person. And so each one of these kind of represents, and all of his mentors represent a different stepping stone along the way. But I don't know why this is here, but we have the fall of Icarus here. So he's on the swing. He's got I think the sucker in his mouth. This definitely shows like just a youthful thing of longing to be in that youthful form again. We see Jungkook potentially get hit by the car, though we don't know if he actually got hit by the car or not, or if that was Jin that really got hit by the car, but we see him get hit by the car. So he, I think, loses that innocence the earliest by force. For whatever that reason is, by force. Which is just very, very interesting to see all these pieces here. Then we have V. So V is literally sitting on the edge. V, I think, represents probably Damien in this sense, which again, we've talked about in the past. He probably lost his innocence at the youngest age, the stuff with his dad, trying to go through all of this stuff, and had accepted his fate very, very early on. So he is almost like the antagonist in terms of egging Jin on, because he's the farthest along in his status. And also, again, with Damien as Sinclair's mentor, it's like the door, that's how the door got open for him really to start sinning, was between him. And then we have all of these members that are covering Jin's eyes, and one by one they're kind of coming undone. Whether or not that's they're going off on their own, or that he's just starting to realize that this, like, his eyes are starting to open, and so these things aren't real. I think that that's all happening in this case. Okay, so then here, Jungkook almost like wakes up in like the upside down, because again, I think that they're all in this kind of like in-between world. And the next thing that we see is Suga here. This one is kind of fascinating because Suga actually looks like he's on glass, which isn't really a place that you want to be, right? I don't know if anybody will want to sit on glass. It could potentially break if you've watched Squid Games at all. I have a very big fear of glass now. But he's sitting here kind of on his own, almost like he is right on the edge. If he's sitting on the glass and there's light coming from above and we don't know what's below, he is like on the cusp. We know of kind of what we saw in like I Need You and in Run, where like he has a thing with Jungkook. I don't know the timeline, but I'm thinking that kind of happened right after that, so he probably feels really bad. We saw back in his with the piano burning and stuff like that, that he is basically ready to let go. And I think that this kind of symbolizes that, is like he's on the shakiest ground in terms of the in-between. And then in this time with the organ and everything like that, you can watch back in the previous videos, but Sinclair meets an organ player who has this fascination with fire. And I do believe, who is kind of in the in-between and talks a lot about that, and they have these very, very philosophical conversations when it comes to like what their beliefs are and about sinning and about Abraxas and things like that. And I think that Suga definitely represents that middle ground. Moving forward a little bit more here. It's so hard to get this. All right, we had the stuff that dripped into the water. I think that the glass here is definitely a representation of more of that temptation, kind of like the green kind of represents apples a lot, right? But it's the representation of that. We have a little bit of fire here right after seeing Suga, so I think that there's just a connection point there. But I think that this is the final portion where RM finally, he kind of gives in, and he loses his innocence, which he again is one of the older members that we see here. Sweeter than sweet, chocolate cheeks and chocolate wings. But no, you're not getting no, you're sweet up and beat up. So we have this kind of talk about the wings here. We saw from Jungkook's painting and stuff like that. And if you guys, again, in Damien, there's the talk about that in order to be reborn, in order to come out of the egg, that you fully have to accept yourself, including all of the sins, including everything that you've done, in order to be reborn as kind of like a perfect being. And so that's really what the conversation is here. And he's finally accepting that at this point, that he knows that it's time for him to go. That's why we see the painting. That's why we see the wings. But there's a temptation aspect to it, that it is hard for them to not sin because sinning is always there trying to pull at them. Then the next part that we see here that's kind of very interesting is we have J-Hope with the bow. Now, in the back, I don't know if you guys remember, but we saw with the Eva portion with the mother, that I believe that J-Hope has probably been maybe like abandoned. He's at Munchausen syndrome is what we saw in his thing, which leads me to believe that there's probably some kind of abandonment and he's looking for attention. And so we kind of see that same figure here with Eva in the background holding the child. Now, I know that that's probably not what this statue is necessarily supposed to be, but it fits in with what we've seen from him in the past. I actually think that he is probably the most innocent. If he had Munchausen syndrome and he's been in the hospital and stuff like that, he probably hasn't had a lot of chance to lose his innocence, and he probably really never grew up properly. And so we see the innocent J-Hope firing this arrow here. And I believe we hit. We also saw him in the water there, almost like the temptation's trying to get him, but he's definitely fighting against it. But then we see the arrow hit later, and it hits V, which is kind of where we have his focus here. Jungkook here is also giving in to temptation when he licks it off of his hand. So he's giving in to temptation here, kind of giving in. Now, again, I don't think that Jungkook's innocence was necessarily one that he lost intentionally, just like Sinclair's wasn't one that he lost intentionally. Sinclair lied and said that he stole the apple from the garden when he really didn't, and then he got blackmailed into doing these things, and that's how he lost the innocence. And that's where I think that Jungkook kind of stands in all of this, is like his dripped on him, and he's like, okay, well, I'm here, and I got to do what I got to do now. We'll come back to the arrow here. I know that I'm kind of piecing through these, but it's a long one. So here, so the arrow hits what looks like V, and we see these kind of cracks come through. I don't know how well you can see these, but we see these cracks, and then the color kind of explodes all over the place. So instead of blood, it's color. It's almost like I feel like Jungkook, or that not Jungkook, that J-Hope is trying to somehow save, like show him that innocence, but then he hits him and realizes like these colors represent like that innocence is kind of lost. The white is the purity, and the colors and the vastness and stuff like that is not. And so I think this is definitely showing here that V's already been far, far gone, and has already gone into all the temptation that could possibly have happened. I also find it very interesting that we see here that the only ones that are wearing lighter clothing are J-Hope has the most light clothing, because I think that he still has the most amount of innocence. We see Suga here with a white shirt on because he's right on the edge, and then Jimin has a blue one on because I think that he's closer. I think these colors definitely represent like where they're at in their journey and how far they are close to the edge. More of the sucker. We have some time things here. We have some old-timey stuff, but there's a little bit of color on the bed. Again, this kind of all looks like just a distorted version of V's house now, or not V, Jin's house now, is kind of what this looks like with the oldenness look. Okay, now we have Jimin with the apple, and we have Suga here. Let's watch through this. And then V jump. So with V's jump there, there's definitely a representation with V jumping that he's fully given in. He is Icarus at this point in time. He flew too close to the sun. He gave everything up, and he's already completely given in. He is definitely the darkest part of him, which is why we see it. I wanted to go back to this, though. So, can't resist it anyway. And here is where I think that Jimin is right on the verge as well, and Suga probably thinks that he's helping him. Like, we see the temptation there, and so Suga kind of like leads him and is like, okay, well, we're gonna do this. And then by doing it, then he gets trapped here, and he can't move, and he can't go anywhere. And so I think while Sugar had the best intentions to just kind of like let go and let it happen, I think that he felt like he was struggling, almost drowning by the decision that he made, which is why we see a lot of that. And again, we saw a lot of the hands coming off of Jin's eyes and all the things that were happening. So we have a lot of that here. Rat Monster is blowing out the smoke. He's already fully accepted it, so I don't think we have to spend too much time more on that. But then we have Jin here. Balloon completely representing the innocence factor, but we have a bright red here, almost representing anger, representing pain, kind of all of that, and we let the balloon go.
He was a tempter. He too was a link to the second. The evil world with which I no longer wanted to have anything to do.
So that is his final kind of like acceptance factor. And we saw during Awake, and the reason it's titled is Jin's very much so in this point waking up to the realities of what's going on. And again, regardless of which theory road that you want to go down, he is finally coming to acceptance, whether that's acceptance of his loss of innocence, whether that's the acceptance of the fact that he may be dead, whether it's the acceptance of the fact that all of these people are within him, that they're dead and he's alive, or he's dead and that they're alive still and he's having a hard time holding on. He's finally coming to that. Now, again, in the store, we have the organ playing here. And the interesting part is this character in Damien is the first one that Damien actually finds kind of as a mentor after not being able to see, or that Sinclair finds as a mentor after not being able to see Damien anymore. Now they're all running out the pillars on the side where all these dark pillars are. So they're all giving in at this point in time. And V is kind of leading him like, hey, Come on, it's okay. We're gonna do this. We're gonna go out these dark pillars. You gotta come out here with me because we're all gonna sin, and he's the tempter. And so we see this happening. Jin hears the music and looks back and is kind of questioning that. And then V goes and puts the eyes over him. And then he wakes up to this. Now, this I believe is definitely, with the white and the black, is probably a representation of Abraxas, of that acceptance and the duality between good and evil, that both of those parts are combined here. But more importantly, we saw that V, later we're going to see that V is the one who lost the wings, and now the wings are here. Okay? And this is extremely, extremely important to the passage that we're about to read. And then Jin goes up and then kisses this statue, which is the acceptance phase, and then the cracks begin on his face. So let's just go ahead and watch that really quick again. This is just haunting now that, again, once you read the book and understand it, this is just becomes haunting. So creepy. Okay, and this part's also important. So when that happens, everything starts exploding. The colors start to converge, even though the innocent, like J-Hope, was trying to save it. The colors all converge here. Eva, the colors are dripping out. Each one of them is given in. Color is dripping down. We even see the statue break at one point in time here. This one. So Eva breaks. And this is so important because at the end of Damien, the realization is that all of these things, while they may have once been real in Sinclair's life, is that all of them since then have actually been in Damien's head, or in Sinclair's head. They're the same person, that's why I can't even, but in Sinclair's head. And so Damien, while he was real, is actually just the inner self, the more adult, more forward-thinking part of Sinclair, and Sinclair couldn't do it on his own, so he kind of created this figure up. And again, it came probably from a real person, but that happened. Eva is the same thing, or Eve is the same thing when we see later, like real person at one point, but then it becomes part of Damien. Like all these people, these mentors, are actually part of Sinclair. Sinclair and Damien are the same person. And at the end of the book, and this is really, really important, and this is where the glass finally breaks, and Sinclair realizes this all. This is in the final pages. Sinclair and Damien are both, I use that, in quotes, are both in war. And this kind of explosion happens, and Sinclair gets hit with shrapnel. And he winds up in a hospital next to Damien in a bed, right? Coincidence, right? But when this happened, he says, Sinclair, he said in a whisper. I signaled to him with my eyes that I understood him. He smiled again, almost as if in compassion. Little one, he said, smiling. His mouth lay now quite close to mine. Softly, he continued to speak. Can you still remember Frank Cromer? He asked. I winked at him and could even manage to smile. And we kind of see that happening with V when V turns around, that slight smile on his face with the realization. Then instead, when he answers him, when Damien answers him, he says, Sinclair, old man, listen, I have to go away. So he just called him little one 3 sentences ago. And now he says, Sinclair, old man, because he knows that Sinclair has finally accepted what's actually happening here. He's finally made his final transcendence and knows that he is Damien, knows that all of these things within him, has made his final trek into adulthood. But he says, perhaps you will need me once again on account of Cromer or something. When you call me, I shall not come riding on a horse or in a train. You must hearken to the voice inside you. Then you will notice it is I, that I am in you. Do you understand? And one other thing. Mother Eve said that if you were ever ill, I was to give you a kiss from her, which she gave me. Close your eyes, Sinclair. I obediently closed my eyes. I felt a light kiss on my lips, on which there was a trace of blood, which never seemed to stop flowing. And then I fell asleep. So this is really what's happening here. And at the moment when Jin kisses the statue is white and pure besides for the wings. And it's because he's finally growing his wings. And that's actually V, the side of V, which is Damien, and Sinclair the same one, which is why you see them so paralleled so much, because V is the Damien portion and Jin represented the more innocent parts of Sinclair early on, including Jungkook. But the reason that we see that is that in that moment, Jin has accepted that, and when he kisses the statue, the statue's now actually Sinclair, and Jin has now taken over as Damien, because he has finally accepted his wings and sprouted into adulthood. And that's where we really see the culmination of this. And that's also why we saw the face on the statue, which represents Eve or Eva, that it breaks, because all of those pieces are no longer pieces anymore, because they're all part of Sinclair, and he has finally accepted that. And all of these pieces, all of them are in the same place. We see all the colors, we see everything like that, we see all the stuff draining down their face, because all of them now, if Sinclair has accepted it, then they've all accepted it. And that's kind of what's happening here. And then at the end, we have him staring at the flowers, and it starts to crack, because he is realizing what has happened. He's realizing his fate. This is part of the reason, though, why I don't know whether I lean there or not, but I have this really big feeling that Jin may actually be dead, or have been dead this entire time, and this is kind of like an in-between world where he's trying to go back and fix things. Because we see that this is kind of like a last-ditch hope, it almost seems like. At the same point in time, it may just be, again, the loss of innocence. It may just be him going back and trying to save the other ones. I don't know, but it almost leads me to believe that Jin may already be dead, and that's kind of what set this whole thing into motion. And the reason that some of the other things happened was because they spiraled more and more into depression because of this happening. But that I don't know. But this is just, it's so cool watching it for a second time and seeing, like, I'm sure that I missed so much even doing this, even though there's already going to be probably a 35-40 minute video, that I probably missed so much in this video because there's just so many pieces. And if I didn't talk about them, I probably will sometime as we keep going through. I think the next things we have to do, there's a bunch of notes. There's like blog posts and stuff that we're going to be getting into. I have the whole extensive list. So we're going to start getting into some of those. With the posts and stuff, I get nervous about now reading things because we got another copyright strike recently because of the webtoon that we read. So I'm getting a little nervous, but we're going to figure out a way to get all of this out and to continue to do the BU, because I'm definitely not going to stop. It's been way too tremendous. So let me know what your thoughts are below. I believe there's a Japanese version of this as well. I don't know where that falls in line, so I'll check out the list and see that, but we're going to do more. If you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when our live streams happen, you know when our videos come out. Check out our other channel if you want to see any of our other content, K-pop, Dimash, or otherwise. And if nobody told you that they love you today, don't forget, I love you. You're appreciated, always welcome here, and you are enough. And last, but certainly not least, it was a great day to play. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.